Started. This time I'd like to call the Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education Board meeting to order. May I have a roll call?
Ms. Beebe. Present. Ms. Beebe is present. Mr. Bennett.
Here.
Mr. Bennett is present. Ms. Bofi.
Here.
Ms. Bofi is present. Ms. Bradford.
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Ms. Dastug.
Here.
Ms. Dastug is present. Mr. Garvey.
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Gio.
Here.
Mr. Gio is present. Ms. Hill.
Here.
Ms. Hill is present. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Ms. Orange-Jones. Ms. Orange-Jones is absent. Mr. Romer.
Here.
Mr. Romer is present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Board members, there's been a request by a member to move an item out of order, and that's item 7.2. No, I can do this now. Item 7.2, the consideration and appointment of the BESE Executive Director. There's been a request to move that up the agenda. I'm recommending that we handle that item between items 4 and 5. Is there any objection to that? Hearing none, just consider it done. Next item is the invocation, and I don't have the person who's doing the invocation. I'm very sorry, and the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm looking for. Oh, here we go. I just found it. Our invocation will be led by Vala Johnson of Calcasieu Parish School System. We're happy to have you. Followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Scott Hughes of the Alliance for Education. Thank you. Please stand.
Would you please bow? Heavenly Father, we pray that you will give us your gift of knowledge, that we might always make the best decisions for the good of all the school children in Louisiana. We pray that you give us the wisdom to know and define our tasks, the strength to build and refine our educational goals, and the courage to persevere as necessary. We ask for your direction that we might make unselfish decisions for those we serve. We pray that all who are assembled here have a safe journey home. We thank you for all your past and future blessings. Amen.
Amen.
If you'd please turn and face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Item 2, approval of the agenda, noting that item 7.2 will now be item 5.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Ms. Bradford, a second by Ms. Bofi, actually in unison.
Ms. Beebe.
Ms. Beebe. Okay, a motion by Ms. Bradford, second by Ms. Beebe. Any objection to approving the agenda? You object?
Yes.
Okay, would you like to speak to your objection?
The reason why I object to the agenda is because of agenda items 3.2, which states a motion by Mr. Romer, second by Ms. Bradford. The board approved as notice of intent revised to Bulletin 133, Scholarship Program 1301, Purpose 1303, Participation Criteria for Non-Public Schools, and 1305, Accountability System for Participating Non.
Ms. Hill, are you objecting to the approval of today's agenda, or are you objecting to the approval of last month's meeting minutes?
Approval of last month's
Okay, I'll recognize you on the next item. Thank you. Okay, we need to pause a moment.
Board members, I'm sorry. I also failed to mention that we were adding items 8 and 9 from the emergency agenda to the agenda this morning.
Okay, so we need the maker and the second of the motion to approve the agenda. Do you accept adding the items 8 and 9 from the emergency agenda?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Beebe?
Yes.
Thank you. So anyone opposed to approving the motion to approve today's agenda? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
Madam Chairman, where is that added item?
It's your, I think it's your item. It's on the emergency agenda.
I know, but I'm looking for the paper.
Okay, well, let's get you a copy.
Yeah, not a thing, but you'll be at a discount, right?
I'll look over some of your
I don't think I have any of that. No. But we
We're good?
we can send it, we need one more.
Okay, we're going to get another copy of the emergency agenda.
We can, I'll share with
They
you.
don't need it.
Okay.
You guys get one, and I'll share.
On behalf of Mr. Rowan.
Okay, in anticipation of the next item, board members, as part of your packet, you're provided with a copy of the previous board's minutes. That would be July 24th, 2012. I'm anticipating that there will be an objection. So if you, board members, if you want to be able to refer to that, it looks like this. It's part of your board packet that was mailed to you. Okay. Let's move on to the next item.
Item 3, approval of the minutes for July 24th, 2012.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes from July 24th, 2012?
I'll move.
Okay,
A
a motion
second.
by Mr. Lee, I have a second by Mr. Gillo. Is there any objection to their motion?
Object.
Okay, Ms. Hill, please speak to your objection.
Yes, the reason why I'm objecting is because agenda items 3.2 on a motion of Mr. Romer, second by Ms.
Can you tell me
Bradford.
what page you're on? I'm sorry, I would like to follow.
Oh, okay.
Page 2. It's actually not in, is it in the
Oh.
binder?
No, it is.
Ms.
Madam Chairman, I would also like to note objection, and I would like to speak to something.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, the board members are still, hold on one second. Board members, would you like to have a copy of this? You're good? Are we good here?
It's in our folder, but we need to know what item.
She's objecting to agenda item 3.2 of the minutes of July 24th, 2012. I'll get back to you, Ms. Hill.
That's fine.
We're good? Everybody ready to go? Ms. Hill, would you please read the item that you're objecting to?
Sure. On motion of Mr. Roman, second by Ms. Bradford, the board approved as notice of intent revision to Bulletin 133 Scholarship Program 1301, Purpose 1303, Participation Criteria for Non-Public Schools, and 1305, Accountability System for Participating Non-Public Schools. And the reason why I'm objecting is because in the last board meeting, I asked Superintendent White, was these policies that were being presented to us on the 24th were already in effect. He stated to me, no, that they were not in effect. However, I received several different emails, and within the emails that I received, it states that the policies were already in effect before the policies even became before we approved as a board. However, the emails that were sent to me were on August 9th, 2012. The Department of Education sent out information stating that please note that all policies developed over the summer are still in effect, including but not limited to the criteria of participation. Then another email was sent out stating that conference calls were scheduled and administered on July 11th, guided by Aaron Bentley, Deputy Superintendent, and then followed another email sent on July 12, 2012, advising schools of limitation of enrollment imposed as result of the guidelines
Madam Chair,
established.
these are minutes of the meeting.
Well,
It just reflects the discussions of the meeting.
Well, the reason why I'm objecting is
Mr. Romer, let's let Ms. Hill
Yes, please.
finish.
And the reason why I'm
and-
objecting
okay.
because in the notice of intent, the process, according to Title 28, which is we supposed to follow as far as board members. And how can we implement policies when they have not become a rule? How can we send out letting individuals know that these policies are set forth and they hadn't even been approved by the board? And on top of that, it even go through the process of the Administrative Procedure Act, which Act 2 specifically states that it has to go through that process. So how can we be implementing policies when they have not even been approved and haven't gone through the process to even be a rule? That's the
Okay,
purpose.
thank you, Ms. Hill.
So you're referring to the school that was told that they are not going to take a certain number of students in advance of this policy, in advance of the criteria on which that decision was based being passed through this board. Is that what you're saying?
I'm referring to the emails that were sent out to various providers.
Yeah, so
That's
the
what-
school being informed that they weren't able to take more kids
Again, I don't want to
before
interrupt.
the rules.
This is the minutes of the meeting. This is a completely separate discussion from the minutes of the
it's
meeting.
not.
Yes, it
It's not.
is. It's a
No, it's
policy
not.
discussion. The minutes of the meeting only give what happened during the meeting, and that's what we approved.
And
That's
that's
correct.
what I'm.
And
that's-
this is what happened during the meeting.
And
It's
that's what I'm
not, it's
referring
not
to.
whether or not she was satisfied with the outcome of the meeting. The minutes reflect what happened in the meeting. And I say, let's approve the minutes.
The decision before us is whether or not, the cause for objection would be whether or not you believe the minutes were inaccurately reflect the decision of the board, not an opportunity to redebate something,
Okay,
Ms. Hill.
I agree, and I believe that it does not reflect because the notice of intent.
Okay, and you've given,
That's the
you've
reason why.
you've made your case.
Yes,
The
and
board
that's
will make a
why.
decision. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Beebe?
Okay, and my comments do reflect the conversation we had at the July meeting, the special.
It's not supposed to reflect the conversation at a meeting. It is supposed to reflect the validity of the
Madam
minutes.
Chairman, will you please afford me the opportunity to speak? I specifically asked staff to include, as a matter of record, my objection to the accountability proposal. If you recall, I was in strong support of the special call meeting. I want the record to reflect, and I have it in print. I made each of you a copy to include in the minutes, because as we move forward in the future, I don't want someone to pick up the minutes of the July 27 meeting to say, well, Ms. Beebe, an educator, she did not embrace accountability. This explains, I did not embrace the accountability submitted on that day because it was not responsible accountability. It did not provide for an equitable playing field. And I have each point noted here, and I want it to be a part of record. That was what my request was at the meeting when I said no.
Ms. Beebe, the minutes reflect that you voted against agenda item 3.2. The minutes reflect that.
Exactly. But I want clarification. I prefaced my no vote with reasons for.
It was actually improper to speak before you voted at that time. I didn't call you out on it, but it was, once we call for the vote.
It was an oversight. Please forgive me.
I'm gonna let Executive Director speak to this.
The minutes are a record of the action that the board took and a record of the vote. It is not a transcript of the meeting, so you will notice when you go through the minutes, we do not, line for line talk about what precisely was discussed. We do provide the video online. We do link it to each agenda item that is discussed at the meeting, but the minutes are different than a transcription of the meeting.
And I will respond to you, Mrs. Pastorek. I am a personnel director in the St. Martin Parish School System. We have minutes, and there are board members frequently asked to have comments included for clarification. This may be BESE's process, but I made a specific request. Moving forward, you can either, I'm making the request again today to have it included. You can say, please see attachment, archive, whatever, but I would like to have it in writing to justify my actions. Thank you.
Okay, board members, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? There's a proper motion and second to approve the minutes. Would anyone else like to speak to that motion?
Yes, I would just like to make a final comment. And the purpose of me objecting to the motion is to let the public know that we always talk about transparency. We talk about accountability. And then when you look at the minutes and you look at what's going on in the Department of Education, it is unacceptable. And that was the reason for me to object to the motion, because here we are sitting here approving policies, and they don't even go through the proper procedures that we as a board are held accountable to Title 28. And not only that, even with the law, Act 2. And so that was the purpose of me pulling and saying that I object to this motion.
Okay. Thank you. You've had your second. Would anyone else like to speak to
I'd like
this?
to make a comment.
Yes, Mr. Romer.
I don't mind you objection. I'm saying this isn't the proper place to do it. Now, you'd like to take personal privilege to point out your problems with a particular policy or issue, we often give that when a board member asks for personal privilege. But that's a completely different issue than whether or not the minutes accurately reflect the business that was held on that day. That was my only point.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor to approve the minutes as presented. Any objections?
No.
Please record Ms. Hill and Ms. Beebe as objecting. All in favor say aye. Aye. The motion carries. Next item.
Item 4, report by the State Superintendent of Education.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We went through a lengthy discussion today of what the plan on academic strategy is, board members, and I thank you for participating in that. Yesterday, also at our board retreat, we had a lengthy discussion of the overall Louisiana Believes plan, so I don't want to belabor any of that. I do want to touch on a dimension that many of you have raised over the course of the last couple of days, which has been about communications and about our efforts to engage communities and educators and families across the state. And principally, I wanted to talk about the transition to our Louisiana Believes advisory committees. We have done 3, in essence, waves of engagement in the development of the Louisiana Believes plan. In the first months of our administration, we did meetings throughout the community on school visits, throughout the state on school visits and on open community meetings. We then followed that up with a round of superintendent meetings and teacher meetings, and that was over the course of March and April. And over the course of June, July, and August have been doing school board meetings. We will have, this week we presented to the Allen Parish School Board, next week Lafayette Parish, Jefferson Parish, Tangipahoa Parish, and St. Tammany Parish. That will mean that the majority of districts we will have had an in-person meeting with, and certainly have had multiple public meetings in every metropolitan area within the state. Subsequent to that, we are viewing that process as ongoing. We'll continue to do these kinds of waves of meetings, these series of meetings, but we're really going to use the Louisiana Believes advisory committees as our primary engagement structure. There are 4 Louisiana Believes advisory committees. One is classroom educators, one is principals and administrators, one is superintendents, and one is community members. The first 3 groups I know are fairly self-explanatory. The community members groups ranges from specific policy advocacy groups to parents and concerned citizens. The superintendent and principal groups have roughly 15 to 20 members each. The teacher and community members have roughly 100 members each, and thus those groups will be broken down into subgroups that have specific leaders. As I mentioned in today's policy forum, there will be 3 activities in which each group will be engaged. One is a quarterly discussion of education reform strategies across the state and across the nation with outside experts. 2 is the advising the department on the ongoing implementation, mainly of Compass and the Common Core. And 3 is the development and implementation of a communications strategy that will carry us forward. Each committee member's commitment is for a year. And so the objective is, after the year, that there's a communication structure that is permanent, put in place with teachers, with community members, with superintendents, and with principals and administrators. And for example, to speak to the enormity of the communications issue, while there has, to one of Ms. Hill's questions earlier, been a lot of information disseminated to teachers, and there's going to be a lot more over the course of the next couple of years about the Common Core, on a national or a statewide level, there hasn't been a systemic effort to inform parents, for example, as to what will be expected of their children in the classroom in light of the Common Core standards. And this is an enormous piece of work that we're going to be asking our Community and Family Advisory Committee to help us with. The committees will be meeting on a quarterly basis. They're not public meetings in that it's not an open forum. Those committee members are specifically there to represent their groups. But we do invite board members to attend. As I mentioned, the first meeting is the morning of September 8th in Lafayette for our educator teacher work or advisory committee, and we welcome you to attend that or any other meeting. We'll share the results of those meetings with the board, and I will provide updates at future BESE meetings on the advice and guidance that's coming out of those meetings. But we're greatly looking forward to it. We owe a great debt of gratitude to each of the members of those committees. We had a kickoff that many of you attended here in Baton Rouge a month and a half ago, and appreciate your time giving me the chance to update you on this aspect of our work this morning. Madam Chairman, that concludes the report.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent. We'll move to the next item. I believe it's item 7.2.
Yes, we'll now take 7.2 out of order, consideration of the appointment of the BESE Executive Director.
Mr. Romer?
I move the board appoint Heather Cope as Executive Director of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education effective September 28, 2012.
Okay, there's a motion to appoint Heather Cope as Executive Director effective September 28th. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Garvey. Any objection to the motion? Okay.
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, is there any discussion? Ms. Beebe?
Yes, please. And I want to apologize to the audience, first of all, following the lead of Mr. Myers.
Ask her to speak
But,
up.
We're having trouble hearing you. Please get close to the mic.
Okay, I want to say that I would be remiss if I did not take the position that I take today. Yesterday, as I sat through the Louisiana Believes retreat, I heard frequently Louisiana believes in its students, believes in its educators. However, this recommendation today indicates otherwise. I strongly believe that actions speak louder than words. So when we say Louisiana believes, I think it's a bunch of hype. Because what we're saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that we do not believe in our product. We have universities in Louisiana. We have the flagship right here in Baton Rouge. And there were approximately 8-10 applicants. And with impeccable credentials. And I don't know how many were called to the table for the interview because I was not in that process. But I will say that I do know that we have individuals in Louisiana who understand our culture, who understand our legislature. They understand the people and the needs. There are educators. Some were from outside of the education arena. In fact, I think there were 2 attorneys based on the resumes submitted. But yet, we are outsourcing our jobs, ladies and gentlemen, in this board, to individuals outside of our state, in fact, Seattle, Washington, by way of New York. And I think this is a travesty. Because, we have people leaving our state every day, going to accept jobs elsewhere. In fact, in January, we made a decision, and the process excluded an opportunity for many of our seasoned, experienced educators to apply for the position. We do that today while we had the application process, and I really honestly can't say what that process entailed. But I just think it is a travesty, and really I don't know the young lady who is being recommended, but I'm sure she is capable. I know that she has 2 years as a teacher, connections with Teach for America, and this is what really concerns me. And I can go on and on, but I will stop at this point to simply say, Louisiana believes, and Mr. White, I will say this. When I go back home and when I meet with educators throughout my BESE district, I told you earlier this morning, yes, they are submissive people, they are professionals, and they are going to do their due diligence to make an impact on student achievement, to positively impact student achievement. But I tell you, the sentiment is, do we really believe? And every time I open my email or I open correspondence that has Louisiana believes, I want to remind you that I ask the question, do we believe in our product? And I really would challenge our university deans to come forward to say we are producing quality people.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Garvey?
Yes, ma'am. If I heard Ms. Beebe's discussion correctly, she said that the process of selecting this candidate that we are proposing this morning excluded candidates from Louisiana. If I heard that correctly, I don't understand it.
No, sir, you misunderstood me. I said
Great, that's
we
why I was
have-
bringing it up.
We have applicants from Louisiana. The recommendation is not favoring someone from Louisiana.
Okay, well, with that in mind, I was going to move on from that point to the next one, which is that I saw applicants from Louisiana come through. I saw resumes from people from Louisiana come through, and we saw resumes from other states come through. In my humble opinion, I thought that the resumes of the people from Louisiana were good, but that the resume of this young lady was better. And I think the duty of the committee was to recommend the best candidate, not the best candidate from Louisiana. And that's why I am recommending this lady, Heather Cope, for this position.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
I have something to say.
Ms.
I'd just
Hill.
like to make a comment to what Mr. Garvey just said.
Ms. Hill, if you'd like the board members to be able to hear you, you'll have to speak into the mic.
However, I'd like to make comment to what Mr. Garvey just stated. When I received the emails last Friday evening via mail, FedEx, the decision was already made. On August 9th, it was in the Advocate stating who the board had already recommended for the position. And when I looked through the resumes on Friday evening, I've seen numerous candidates, expectations as far as their experience and knowledge far precede this young lady's. And so we always talk about we want the best candidate. And when I looked through these resumes, I saw individuals where they were out of state, in state, that would have been a great candidate for this position. This young lady doesn't have as much experience as some of these other candidates in this packet that's sitting in front of me. So I just want to assure you, and just to make that point, because we do need the best for our children in Louisiana. Louisiana has its own culture. Louisiana is different than any other state. And I'm from Miami, Florida. And coming to Louisiana, I had to learn the culture of Louisiana. I had to learn the people of Louisiana. And so who better yet knows Louisiana than someone that is from this state to actually do the best for our children? That's
Madam
what I-
Chairman?
Mr. Garvey.
Yes. I don't know if there was an article in the Advocate on August 9th stating whether or not this candidate was being considered or to what extent she was being considered. And maybe Ms. Hill did review resumes the next day, I think she said on August 10th, and found some that were, in her opinion, stronger than the candidate that we're presenting today. But I have in front of me an email that was sent out by you on July 24th, a week or so before, or 2 weeks, or more than that, before the August 9th date, where you recommend that the BESE members then start looking at resumes. It doesn't say anything about waiting until August 9th or August 10th. I would think that the better time to have looked at resumes would have been on July 24th, because that is when the rest of us were looking at resumes. We were not waiting until August 10th.
That's correct. All board members were advised that their resumes were available and that they could review and provide input on June 24th. And frankly, many of our BESE members took advantage of that opportunity, and they provided input to the committee who decided that the individuals that would be interviewed. So, board members, the officers and the interview committee did their best to follow the process. We feel like we did. We're bringing forth who we believe is the strongest candidate, and we recommend the appointment of Heather Coe.
Am I close?
Yes, sir. It is your motion, I'm sorry.
Can I speak?
Yes, I'm so sorry, Ms. Bofi, and then Mr. Romer.
I had the opportunity both to see the resume, talk to the individual, and interview the individual. And despite my attempts to talk her out of a position that I can't imagine that anyone would want, she's still interested. And I do need to talk to the Teach for America issue that Ms. Beebe raised. And I think a lot about this, and I look at it as a educator who came into the classroom from the traditional route, and think about Teach for America and the fact that there are a lot of Teach for America alumni in positions that are influencing education. And so I don't think that this is the fault of Teach for America as much as it is the fact that we do not have any other avenues that are providing pathways for people and training people in such a way to prepare them for these positions. So, I mean, there's positions that I would like to have in education that I haven't had the training because I haven't had that kind of background. And so my recommendation is for organizations who are interested in influencing the way that education is going to proceed is to step up to the plate. And so I will say to Ms. Cope's resume that I think that she's going to do an outstanding job. When I think about what we need now, I think that she has the skills that we need to bring us forward. And so with confidence, I will vote for Ms. Cope for this position.
Thank you, Ms. Bofi. Mr. Romer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for leading the way on the process. I think everyone was invited to participate early on in the process in whatever way they wish to participate, everything from just review of resumes to participating in a phone interview to showing up in personal interviews. I appreciate that. I know you extended that opportunity to me, and I'm grateful that I was able to participate. I want to say on behalf of this candidate, I thought she interviewed was excellent. She was very articulate. She had very even temperament, but a lot of passion at the same time. She has both experience on a policy level, a political level, and on an actual teaching level. I thought that combination of skill set and experience would provide each of us a different perspective from which to make our decisions. And so while we had many good candidates, and I feel good that we had good candidates, I felt at the end of the day this was the best candidate, and I hope it works out that way. And for that reason, again, I move the board appoint Heather Cope as Executive Director of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Thank you. Now the board, everyone who has had an opportunity to speak has spoken. We do have a public comment card. Mr. Meyer, do you still wish to speak? No, you get 3 minutes. Now, starting now. 1001, 1002.
I try to use my new voice. I was in service prior to this, so, and Ms. Buffy already ticked me off, so I'm coming. I have to concur with Ms. Beebe. Can I ask just 2 questions, and you can just say yes or no if I can. How many applicants were there?
Over 20,
And
27.
and were they all interviewed?
No, there was not logistically the possibility to interview all 24. We went through a vetting process where the officers and the 2 members who volunteered to serve on the committee brought forth their recommendations, and then we put all those names together and we interviewed 4 individuals.
So we're making a recommendation based on a resume and not necessarily, okay.
I don't know any employer that interviews everybody who applies for a position.
Well, I'm going to have to just concur, as I said yesterday, that we've got people in Louisiana. Ms. Lottie wasn't necessarily disrespecting Teach for America so much as We have people here, and they are available. So I'm just saying, please give the people in Louisiana the opportunity to work in the Department of Education, those that know the Department of Education and know public education. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much better.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Any objection to the motion?
Object.
Okay, we have two objections. Ms. Hill, Ms. Beebe, all in favor say aye. Motion carries. Next item.
Item 5.1, Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, Ms. Bofi.
On behalf of the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, I recommend approval of motions 1 through 12, noting that items 11 and 12 are notices of intent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item 5.2, Administration and Finance Committee, Mr. Gio.
On behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I recommend approval of motions 1 through 55, pulling items 15, 18, and 55.
Okay, is there a motion, is there a second to Mr. Gillo's motion?
Second.
By Mr. Lee. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, we're going to approve, excuse me.
I'm going to recuse myself from the vote.
Okay, so please note that Mr. Gillo has recused himself. Would you like me to dispense with the other motion, and then we'll handle the three that were pulled? Okay, any objection?
Well, let me ask a question. Should someone else make the original motion?
Yeah.
Okay, well then,
I think they probably should.
okay, then Mr. Lee, will you make the motion as vice chair, or as co-chair?
Yeah.
Okay, the motion is made by Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Garvey. We'll keep you out of it. And then any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Then we go to item 15. Mr. Gillo, I think you can handle it at this point. Just let's start with 15.
This is behind tab 5.2, board members.
Thank you.
Yeah, this would be on page 9 of the booklet for today. Item number 15, student-centered goals, other, on motion of Mr. Garvey, seconded by Mrs. Bradford. The Administration and Finance Committee recommends the board approve the following grant: non-public school early childhood development program for roughly $6.8 million.
Thank you. Was this item pulled at the request of a member, Mr. Gillo?
Yes, Ms. Beebe.
Okay, Ms. Beebe, would you like to speak to this
I
item?
just needed some clarification. If I remember correctly, yesterday it was stated that this was money provided by the governor's office. Is that correct?
This is an interagency transfer of a funding source that is now to be administered by the department, what was previously administered by the administration. The rationale being that, and that change is provided by the legislature. The rationale being that all pre-K programs now subject to Act 3 of the legislature will be managed out of this agency.
Okay, so
Yep.
it would be, and the concern was recurring, but it's just a process, it's a shift in
the resources as well as in the responsibilities. The dollars moved with the program. So this is not an additional cost to anyone.
So would you like to make a motion to approve item 15, Ms. Beebe? Okay, we have a motion to approve item 15, a second by Mr. Bennett. Any objection?
I'd like to recuse myself from that.
Okay, Ms. Bradford has requested recusal. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. The motion was made by Ms. Beebe, seconded by Mr. Bennett, with Ms. Bradford recusing. Hearing no objection, this motion passes. We go to item 18. Mr. Gillo.
Item number 18, page 11, on motion of Ms. Bofi, seconded by Ms. Dastuke, the Administration and Finance Committee recommends the board approve the request for applications for the IDEA grant program.
Okay, Mr. Gillo, was this item pulled at the request of a member?
Ms. Beebe.
Ms. Beebe. Ms. Beebe, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question to ask Superintendent White. With reference to this grant, was there discussion with your special ed advisory group, and you might have indicated that yesterday?
There was not.
There was not. Okay. Now, I did pull I think there was an email sent out, and I did find out that there is a stipulation within the grant proposal that this money is not to include, or this proposal is not to include professional learning and other contract services. So, you know, when we talk about, I think yesterday there was a large discussion, talked of, you know, encouraging districts and teachers to be empowered. So why would we not put emphasis on professional learning?
Well, there's a distinction between professional learning as opposed to vendors who do professional development services. And what effectively the grant is trying to do, and just to rehash this for the audience as well as for other board members, under our new leadership in the Office of Student Programs, we found $4 million in bureaucratic redundancies that we are now giving to schools. We're doing that under it's IDEA dollars, so we're doing it under a competitive process around the focus on students with special needs. And what we're trying to identify are replicable, scalable practices in schools that we can then say that level of innovation allows students with disabilities to be served in the least restrictive environment and to pursue the Common Core standards. What we don't want in our applications, and this is all just guidance, in other words, it's not a hard and fast rule, it's just guidance. What we don't want is we've got a bunch of people who are going to come out and do PowerPoint presentations about how to level texts. And it's fair, I think, to say that very often when you put out such grants, that kind of proposal comes back. Vendors proposing who are not from within the school organization, proposing to come into the school and do a bunch of trainings. We want to see transformation within the school, and whether that means buying essentially more time for teachers to collaborate, whether it means technology tools that will help teachers assess and track students, whether it means additional responsibilities for teachers, whether it means purchasing a para so that we can do collaborative team teaching work. You know, that kind of structural change we want to see because it's scalable. Training sessions are not scalable absent, you know, continued additional resources.
Well, I just want to respond with all due respect. I, as a practitioner in the field, I recognize that sometimes we need the experts, and there are those outside of our school system that we could call upon for their expertise. And so, I mean, that's my objection. And when we look at other countries, their success, like Finland and Singapore, those countries, they focus on professional development. And I can appreciate what you're saying. You're not saying, I mean, as it's written in that proposal, as we send out to school systems, and I'm sure they have it by now, I think many will conclude that they are not to consider the professional development opportunities. You know, it says that you're providing, the emphasis is to provide direct services to students, but if those services to students are not, let me restate it. We may need individuals who will assist our teachers in providing those exceptional services to students. So is there a way that we could reconsider? And I can appreciate you said it's nothing that prohibits districts from providing the professional development, but sometimes we need the experts outside.
I don't disagree with that, and if there's a circumstance where, for example, the collaboration among teachers requires an outside facilitator, we'd be more than open to that. What we're trying to provide districts an indication is that just a bunch of pull-out sessions, which frankly is oftentimes what such grant programs go toward, is not a replicable, scalable practice. It's just something that you continue to pay more money for. We're looking for innovations of practice within the school that we can then say, okay, if this school can change their processes and structures and instructional approach as such, then other schools can as well, without you know, an enormous investment of resources. And so you're right, if there's the need in supporting this for there to be outside groups, we're fine with that. What we're trying is to provide very strong guidance that the bulk of a grant, we don't want to be this group coming in and doing 10 training sessions.
Okay, but then as a follow-up, may I ask you to communicate what you just stated to our districts? Because our educators are submissive.
We'd be happy
to.
And
when they read that application and it says no professional learning or contract services, they are going to abide by the letter of the law.
I think we'd be happy to send the message that I just sent in our email next week.
Thank you.
And Mr. Osborne can help us with that. Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve item 18? Thank you, Ms. Beebe. Second? Ms. Bofi, any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
This is going to be item number 55 on Admin and Finance, page 28 of the packet of the book. On motion of Mrs. Dastug, seconded by Mr. Lee, the Admin and Finance Committee recommends the board defer consideration of executive session to discuss the annual evaluation of the State Superintendent of Ed until the anniversary of the superintendent's appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Guyot. Was this pulled as a request of a board member?
Yes, Ms. Beebe.
Ms. Beebe, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, Ms. Dastard, thank you. As per my conversation with you yesterday, it is noted in Act 54 that the superintendent's performance and those employees within his department who earn $100,000 or more, they are compelled to adhere to the performance, to the evaluation that is in place for administrators and teachers. So having said that, I know we touched on it and we said that there is a document in place, but I did go back, I did return home and I looked at my paperwork again, and I think that document is somewhat obsolete. So I'm asking you, Madam Chairman, to once you get that committee, or I hope that you would get a committee together, and I would like to serve on the committee as we move forward.
I appreciate, let's make sure that we document Ms. Beebe's request to participate and work on this instrument, and please document that, and you have my word. Ms. Bofi.
Dastug, I'd like to be involved in the development of that instrument as well.
Okay, thanks, and please note that Ms. Bofi would like to participate also.
Ms. Dastard?
Yeah,
I'd
Mr.
like to
Garvey.
not participate in that.
Please note that Mr. Garvey has no interest in participating. Okay, it is a work that the officers and board admin and fellow members need to work on. We'll be communicating with you shortly. Thank you, Ms. Beebe. Is there a motion on item 55?
I move.
Thank you, Ms. Beebe. Is there a second? Mr. Bennett, any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 5.3, AG public hearing, Mr. Lee.
The committee met to receive input for the 8G budget for the 13-14 school year. There were no comments by the public.
Wow.
That completed the work of that committee.
Okay, so is there, Mr. Lee has made a motion to approve the minutes of the AG public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Guyot. I guess we can do whatever we want, right, Mr. Lee? I guess the board can do whatever they want with AG now, yes. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 5.4, Committee of the Whole, RSC Matters Only, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, Mr. Garvey.
Yes, in Ms. Jones's absence, I'd like to recommend on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, RSC Matters Only, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, that we approve items 1 through 5.
Okay, is there a motion by Mr. Garvey? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Romer, any objection to this motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item.
Item 5.5, Educator Effectiveness Committee, Ms. Beebe.
On behalf of the Educator Effectiveness Committee, I recommend approval of motions 1 through 15.
Okay, there's a motion by Ms. Beebe to approve the minutes. Is there a second? By Mr. Bennett. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item 5.6, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, Mr. Garvey.
Yes, on behalf of the School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I would like to recommend the approval of motions 1 through 8, noting that items 4, 6, and 7 are notices of intent.
Okay, Mr. Garvey has made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
By Ms. Bradford. Any discussion? Any objection? Motion passes. Next item.
Item 6.1, Superintendent's Advisory Council. The board is asked to receive the minutes and approve the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Lee to receive and approve. And there's a second by Ms. Bradford. Any objection? Any discussion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item 7.1, consideration of approving new faculty course offerings and textbooks for FY 2012-2013 for the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts. The recommendation is to approve.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. If you look at these courses, I'm glad I'm not in high school at this point. But very impressive. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Motion passes. Next item.
Now moving to the emergency agenda, item number 8, discussion of the Louisiana Administrative Code, Title 28, BESE Code, Chapter 13.
Okay, board members, this item was added at the request of Ms. Beebe. I believe that we have, I'm going to let Ms. Beebe lead and begin the discussion. If you want to look at the Louisiana Administrative Code, Title 28, Chapter 13, you can access it on your iPad. So that is an option for you. Ms. Beebe, since you put this item on the agenda, would you like to begin?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dastu. And first, I want to say to the board that I put this item on the agenda not
Ms.
because I
Beebe,
wish to
I
complicate the
apologize. I
process.
really struggle hearing her. I apologize.
Okay.
You've got to get to the mic, Ms. Beebe.
Okay. First, I want to state to the board that I put this item on the agenda not because I wish to complicate the process that is required of us. I did it because I don't want to find out down the line or down the road that some of the things we did here at these meetings were against the law. I think that if it turns out to be the case, the best thing for all of us to do is for all of us and for the students we serve to get it right from the beginning so that if, when rules are approved by this board, they are valid and legally created. In other words, I don't want to find out later that what we did here will be seen as not having the effect of the law to the detriment of our students and to our state. Title 28, Chapter 13, Section 1303 tells us that all rules adopted by the board must be adopted in accordance with the Louisiana Administrative Procedures Act.
Didn't we have this?
The Louisiana Administrative Procedures Act is located within the law at ORS 49:953. And of course, it provides for a 90-day process before the rules adopted become final. And actually, those 90 days don't even begin to toll into the rule as approved by BESE and is published in the Louisiana Registry. Okay, and I'm speaking to the definition of rule. A rule is a statement, guide, or requirement for conduct or action exclusive of those regulating only the internal management of the board or the department, which has general applicability and the effect of implementing or interpreting substantive law or policy, or which prescribes the procedure or practice requirements of the board. The term rule includes the amendment or repeal of an existing rule. And this comes about as a result of the July 27th meeting in which we approved proposals. It goes out for notice of intent, and so the board approves the proposed rule to be advertised as notice of intent, and it will serve as authorization for the BESE executive director to submit the notice of intent to the Louisiana Register for final adoption as rule at the expiration of the 90-day advertisement period. If no public comments are received relevant to said notice of intent, or if comments are received, the comments will be considered by the board prior to final adoption as a rule. And as Ms. Dastu said, this is available to you. As I said, my question is, since for some of our rule promulgations, specifically items we've approved under both bulletins 130 and 133, they have not become final, and as Ms. Hill attempted to tell you earlier, they have not undergone the full 90-day period. So how can this department legally, or our board, legally begin the implementation of those rules? And I've been thinking about this, and in fact, we posed the question of Ms. Hunt the other day, and I can appreciate her comments, but I continue to urge her that, or to say to her that she has a duty to inform us properly regarding our duty under the law, and I want to make sure that we are not party to an illegal usurping of the authority given to us by the legislature to create and implement rules. And of course, common sense tells us that if a rule hasn't yet become final, it probably shouldn't be used in our schools. The whole point of the rulemaking process is that it begins with a notice of intent to create or alter a rule. Notice for some rules that are being implemented hasn't even been published. In fact, I visited the registry last night. So how can we implement rules if they're not really rules? In other words,
Okay.
they're not adopted.
Have you, I think you've posed the question. Do board members understand the question that Ms. Beebe has asked?
No, ma'am.
You do not? Let me suggest, because this is the same question that was asked and was answered and that the board acted on in the last meeting, so. Well, no, do you still have more to say?
Yes.
Okay.
So I know what you're going to say, is that Ms. Hunt says that it is a practice, it's acceptable. But, I mean, it's there in black and white.
I'm going to
So I
ask
need an
Catherine.
interpretation. I mean, I need someone.
Okay,
But
so.
this is what I'm going to say. This is my recommendation. I will personally seek an opinion from the Attorney General, because when you read Act 2, it says that you have to follow the administrative code, and it has to go out, you have to do, we're not
Ms.
operating
Beebe,
under the rule.
in all respect, since you've laid this you brought this forth, you put it on the agenda, I think it's only fair that we let Executive Director, who has significant responsibilities around rulemaking and ensuring that we do things properly, ask Catherine Posniak to respond, and then I'm going to ask Ms. Hunt, since she's had some time to think perhaps a little more about this issue, to come to the table and respond. Because you've raised some questions, and I think it's only fair that the board has the opportunity to hear from the two people who advised us on this.
That's why I put it on the agenda.
Okay, Ms. Posniak.
So I think it's important to make a distinction between the law that was written in Act 2 and the policy that the board is passing. So the law in Act 2 dictated that directed the superintendent to come up with the criteria for the scholarship program by August 1st. He complied with that. Thus, that criteria exists because of law, outside of the policy that BESE approved to be promulgated. So often is the practice that something exists in law, BESE will then either derive its policies from that law or will actually replicate what is in law in its bulletins and in its bulletins, so that schools, administrators, teachers have all of the guidelines and laws and the policies that they're supposed to follow in one place. Regardless of whether this policy, its process, this criteria exists according to Act 2 in law, you are correct. The policy and the notice of intent that the board approved at the July 24th meeting has not started the notice of intent process, or has not been published as a notice of intent, but it is enforceable because it is part of a law that the legislature passed, and that was by design of the way that they directed the superintendent to come up with that criteria for the scholarship program.
Are you finished? No, 1 second, please. Have you finished your explanation?
I believe so.
Okay. Ms. Beebe, I'm going to go to other members. You've had plenty of time to talk. I will go back to you to close. Okay, Mr. Garvey.
I still don't understand her question exactly.
Wait,
let me ask you this. Is there a motion on the table?
There's no motion.
Do we need a motion on the table in order to discuss an item?
We should. Would you like a motion to receive the discussion of Louisiana Administrative Code? The chair would entertain that motion. Do you want to have a motion?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
I move.
So what are you moving?
Well, you said you needed a motion to discuss. I'll move to discuss.
No, not move. You've already discussed it. Move to.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah, you don't just move to discuss. Okay, we're going to stay in discussion.
Okay.
Miss-
I have a question.
Are you
and maybe-
I'll come back to you, Mr. Garvey.
And maybe Mr. James Garvey can, since he is an attorney, he can pop. When I read up through Act 2, I don't know if you guys have it in front of you or not, but I do. It says that the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education shall adopt and rule and regulation in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act to implement the provisions of this chapter. So, Mr. Garvey, I know you're an attorney. The word shall means in what in legal terms?
It means shall.
Okay, shall mean that you cannot deviate. It has to go through that process. So that's my question. If Act 2 states that, it specifically states in the law that it shall adopt and these rules and regulations in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act, to what Ms. Beebe is stating. It has to go through that process before we can implement it into a policy. So I think that's where the
She's not
confusion,
here.
and we can help us understand.
I don't remember the act stating that,
I have
anything about before we can take action on the rules, that we have to have them published and follow all of the procedures that are required before we start working on them. I would suggest that we hear from the department's attorney on this issue before we really start discussing this.
Our attorney's deferring to our attorney.
You can turn on your mic.
Joan, can you turn on your mic?
Oh, there it is, sorry. I was going to say, there are many shells in Act 2, and one of them in RS 174015 is what the department shall do. And the department shall, on or before August 1st, develop criteria for participation that includes an accountability system for participating students at participating schools. Therefore, the department did what it was mandated to do under the law.
Ms. Hunt, if I might interject as well, the department has also provided communication separate and apart from BESE to the legislature, indicating the department's compliance with its obligation, and not an option, it's obligation under the law to develop those criteria. Whether BESE chose to adopt those criteria is a separate question from that. We've provided communication under our obligation under the statute to the legislature, indicating that we complied with that, and thus are implementing it per the August 1 date that the legislature set in the statute.
That's correct.
Any further discussion?
Oh, yes, I have another question. I just heard Ms. Hunt say that in Act 2, it stated that the department shall develop criteria before August 1st, but not implement the criteria before August 1st.
Which date did it set for implementing it?
It didn't say before August 1st. It didn't say period. However, you shall develop the criteria before August 1st to make sure that you meet the deadline of the...
When you have a criterion for participation, when that criterion exists, and we're getting into some serious existentialist questions here, but at that point, then a criterion exists, and either you fall within that criterion or you don't. And the school that triggered this discussion from your perspective, I believe, Ms. Hill,
from others' perspective.
when the criteria had been developed, fell outside of the criteria. So it's not a matter of implementing them, it's a matter of there being criteria for participation, and certain schools fall within those criteria and others don't. It's not a matter of there being a date at which they're implemented. The minute a criterion exists is the minute that schools either fall within or fall without those criteria.
Okay, and so with you saying that, if that's the case, what was the purpose of bringing it to the board to get it approved of accountability?
As Ms. Posniak has already said, the board in many instances chooses to reflect either statutes or, in this relatively rare case of the department being instructed by the legislature to make policy, to adopt those policies and to adopt those statutes reflected in the board's own regulations. It's a procedural issue that's done all the time, and you'll see in many of the other regulations the board has passed over the last several months, they are reflections, sometimes verbatim, of the statutes, the legislature's instructions to school systems.
Okay, and my final statement, and maybe Ms. Hunt, you can refer since you are the legal counsel. I did hear you say what the Act 2 stated, that the department shall develop these criteria. But if you look at page 46 or 47, where it says rules, it says the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education shall adopt and rules and regulations in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act to implement the provisions of this chapter. So could you expound on that?
Yes, I'd like to point out something as well. The effective date of this act was August 1st, and so the department had to develop criteria by August 1st, and at that time it did become effective. But to your point about the BESE adopting rules and regulations, there's a lot in Act 2. There's things in Act 2 that talk about what school districts shall do, or what participating schools shall do, and what BESE shall do, and what the department shall do. So the part that BESE shall do is not necessarily overlapping with the parts that other entities are mandated to do. Although you are correct that BESE is to adopt rules and regulations in accordance with the APA as to what their obligations are under this act.
So in other words, the legislators just gave the approval, just make sure I have clear understanding, in this past session, they gave the approval for the department to implement these criteria, to develop these criteria and go ahead on and implement them, and then bring them to BESE on the 24th, while they already been implemented, and then we'll approve it, correct?
It's correct that
Okay,
the
that's
act
all you
mandated that the department develop these criteria, and that had to be done obviously before the start of the school.
And they
The
can go ahead
effective
and
act of
implement
it-
it before the 24th.
So
It is
just so
also-
I understand, and I've asked this before during this meeting, your issue is that the school that you raised that was in question, and you came with and then they testified, we sent
What makes you think it's that school? There's
notification, this is Upper Room Bible,
No,
we
it's other
sent,
schools
we
too.
sent notification that their enrollment was to fall within the criteria for participation, and you're saying that that was before what?
I'm just saying that I received numerous emails from various providers, not just from one particular provider.
As
That's
to
not even
what?
my district.
As to what effect?
It's to what, that the participation, as far as their criteria, as far as enrollment of the students, was already implemented before the board had even approved the criteria.
No, that's not right. The implementation of an enrollment criteria is when the students are assigned to a school. The board approved the criteria the morning of the 24th. The afternoon of the 24th, the number of kids assigned to schools were announced publicly. There's nothing prohibiting us from saying these regulations are in place, and at this time, we're projecting this is how many kids are going to be assigned to your school, but it was announced after the passage of the criteria of participation how many students were going to be assigned. And that's just a fact.
Okay, Superintendent, I'm not going to have a debate, but in August of May of this year, schools were assigned slots.
Incorrect.
For example,
That is
New
not
Living
correct.
Word, it was in the newspaper. They had over 300 plus slots. I'm not debating that. I just want to make sure that we're in compliance. However, then the department came back in July and made a whole different change, and then they put these criteria in place and this accountability before it even came to that's the point I'm making. So I just rest my case, and Ms. Hunt, I think that you answered the questions that I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions of the board? Ms. Bradford?
Ms. Hunt, in your opinion, are we in compliance with the Administrative Code, Title 28, Chapter 13?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, but then let's go to, we have two speakers. We'll start with Steve Monahan with the LFT, and then we'll go to Wayne Free with the LAE. Y'all can sit at the table together. Go ahead. 3 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and members of the BESE board, and Mr. Superintendent. I think I agree with the superintendent when he indicated there were many existential questions that are contained within the layers of the initial question, which is a simple one but not so simple, regarding the Administrative Procedures Act. I think it would be really an existential exercise to try to unwind what has happened in the past. And the question shouldn't be a question whether or not what you're doing really is legal, even though I think it's an important one. I think the question should be, what are you doing? if you want to really get existential about this. And how do we let folks know what you're doing? We passed, or you passed, representatives of the people, a policy dealing with the implementation of the scholarship program. That's a fact, easy to disassemble. That happened. And that was supposedly leading to promulgation of rules. And that's when we get into the question of what does promulgation actually mean? And I'm saying this with really all due respect to your role as governing members of a board. Because what that means to most of us is we start communicating to teachers and the community in our sphere of influence of what this means to you and how you input the process, the democratic process. However, please understand your public has no idea. Because if you go and try to capture what the rules are, they're not published yet, because the intent, even though you did an intent, notice of intent, you really haven't noticed any one of intent. So when we attempt to impact policy, improve it, it really never happens. It's not only in regard to this particular bulletin, 130 or 133. The bulletins, to me, are like living organisms. I understand politics in the election process. If you want to tomorrow meet or next time you meet and declare day as night, you can do that as long as you have a majority of votes. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it universally true. It doesn't tell me how I change your mind on that. There should be a process right now, I would think, that this body would want to involve itself in, which is, here are the rules out there in accordance with Act 2. Here is how the public can influence those, improve those, stakeholders, whatever you want to call us. And this is the logical, methodical way to do it, because we're not saying we have the absolute best thing here. We made an attempt. And so what is that process? When does the 90 days start? When does it conclude? When does this body do what I've read in the law, the corresponding laws that come out of the Procedures Act? When does this body finally finalize the policy? In 90 days automatically? Or do you all send up smoke out of this building? Does everyone cheer? How does it happen? How do we know it happened? I think if you're going to, I hope the work for this board would make the process more democratic and more informed so that we understand what the rules are. We still have teachers thinking in terms of the evaluation plan, Ms. Daskew, and I'll close here. Is it 4 ratings? Is it 5 ratings? Is it 4 ratings? Is it 5 ratings? It's because the process itself is forever ongoing without any indication of where we are in the rulemaking process. And it needs to be corrected. I think a good start is, are you doing what is right or legal? But are you doing what makes sense, that the public can understand it and we all can feel better about what we're doing? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Monahan. Mr. Free.
Wayne Free, Louisiana Association of Educators. I think I agree with Steve, but I would like to take the discussion away from the particular issue and focus on what I understand is going on. The legislature said, you shall do this. They also said there is a process for establishing rules and making sure those rules are examined by the public and responded to. It would be appropriate, it would be smart for you to ask for an opinion as to how that should be done in all cases, not in this case or any other case, but in all cases. Not knowing that leaves everybody without some understanding of what should or shouldn't be occurring. And it leaves the public with the idea that you don't know what you're doing. And that's a shame.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Mr. Romer.
You know, I'm not certain what everybody's talking about. It's the law mandated the criteria be established by August 1st. Now, this board had to make a choice. Did we want to participate in the development of that criteria or not? We could have stayed home and let the superintendent do it without our input and without any public input. We made a choice as a body to have a meeting for the specific purpose of helping craft that criteria and specific purpose of getting input. Any characterization other than that is inaccurate and not a fair reflection of what this body did. I understand some people don't support scholarships. It is your right to stand up and say you don't support them. I've stood alone many times, and I like seeing others do the same, even when it's against me at times. And it's okay if you don't believe the criteria were the correct criteria. You're free to say so. But to say that this body did not do its responsibility is erroneous. And you want to know what's offensive? That's offensive. You know what the problem with politics today is? Too many politicians don't do the responsibility. And they do hide in a closet when they can. They shy away from making decisions if they don't have to. They don't want to answer any questions. This board chose to have a meeting. This board chose to be on the record. In any characterization of this board, whether you voted for the policy or not, whether you agree with the policy or not, this board showed up and did its duty that day. And I think they deserve credit for it and not condemnation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. If there's no further discussion, we'll move to the next item. Ms. Beebe.
Okay. I do want to say, Mr. Romer, in response to your comments, the reason I put this on the agenda is to have it explained to me, the administrative code and the rulemaking, so that when we move forward, and even in this instance, to make sure that we're within the law. And I can appreciate Ms. Hunt's comments, but at the same time, when I read it, I see that the legislative directive is in conflict with the last statement on that page, with regard to Act 2. It says that we need to stay within the administrative code. We're compelled to do that. So it's like a conflicting matter. And Mr. Freed's comments, I had written it down as well. The fact that it is, we have the question of the point that the legislators issued a directive, and yet we are compelled to follow the administrative code. Also am concerned, a gentleman who was an attorney, when we had the discussion on July 27th, he made comments regarding conflicting information. This item, it says this, and on page whatever, there's a conflict. And I didn't take notes, but I mean, that's the purpose for putting it out, as I understand, putting this information out for notice of intent, so that it allows the public input, so that we can make the right decisions moving forward. And I will, independent of you, or if it's necessary, maybe I need to ask Ms. Hunt, I'm going to ask for an attorney general's opinion, not to cast, I'm a part of this board. I want the answer. I want the right answer.
Make one comment, please.
Sure. And then
I have no issue with you bringing this up, Ms. Beebe. None whatsoever. Okay, I have no issue if you pull every item on the agenda and you want to discuss it. I have never tried to keep somebody from voicing their opinion. Never have. And I have no issue with you bringing this item up for clarity. That was not my point of what I said. There has been a characterization made about this board not doing its duty, and I wanted to make sure it was clear that we had. Now, I have no issue with you getting clarification on your question. I want to be clear about that.
Staff, is there a motion or?
there's not a motion. If the discussion has ended, we can move to the next item.
I just want to make just one final point. And I just want to, and you can understand how Ms. Dest do. And
You know what, Ms. Hill,
I think you
for
and I
a
had
matter,
this conversation
I'm not cutting you
yesterday.
off, Ms. Hill. I'd like the opportunity to recognize you. That's my
Okay,
job.
okay.
Thank you. Ms. Hill.
Thank you. And I just want to piggyback on what Ms. Beebe said and Chaz. The purpose of this item being on the agenda is not to have anyone feel that they didn't do their job or have anyone feel that what we did was not right. The purpose of this is for us to get clarity, to understand, because when we read information and we interpret things and not having the proper training, then this is what the board is for. This is why we have the Department of Education, to give us clarity. This is not about if we agree with the policy or not. It's about right versus wrong. If we're doing what's right or we're doing what's wrong. And that was the purpose of us bringing this, to make sure that we are in compliance, to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do as a body, as a board. Because if not, then we're going to have lawsuits flying everywhere. And so that was the purpose, to get clarity, not to sit here and condemn anyone or to point out a certain point at any particular situation. It was for us to get the clarity that we need. And Superintendent White, I want you to know, and Mr. Rome, I want you to know, being a new member on this board, we are all learning as we go. We're learning. All of this is new to us. I'm not even an educator. This is new to me. But there are some things on the board that I see that I don't agree. There are some things on the board I see and hear that I do agree. And I just hope that we all can respect one another's opinions and that we can continue to move forward to do what's best for the children. Thank you.
Okay. I think I have the right to make a very brief comment. When there are questions around our code, around the board's actions, I think we were very careful. I don't believe that the superintendent nor his legal counsel nor our own executive director would allow this board knowingly, and I think they go through some extraordinary measures to make sure that we don't do things that are illegal or improper. And I would encourage members, when they have questions and they need further clarity on our code, on our processes, on our practices, that they use the resources that are available to them, and that is the BESE staff, that is Ms. Hunt, our own legal counsel in the Attorney General's office, and the state superintendent, and your fellow experienced board members who have been here for many, many years, who are more than willing to sit down and to work with you to help you gain a greater understanding. Please know that we're here for you, new members, as you work through your greater understanding on how to be a responsible board member. Thank you. Next item.
Item number 9, consideration of a records review regarding the issuance of a Louisiana teaching certificate appropriate to the credentials of Mr. Daniel Hanlon. The recommendation is for the board to either grant or deny the issuance of a Louisiana teaching certificate appropriate to the credentials of Mr. Hanlon.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Lee, then Ms. Bradford.
I'm wondering, why is it on the emergency agenda?
Mr. Hanlon had gotten all of his information in 10 days in advance of the meeting. However, we were waiting on his fingerprint background check. And he does have a job lined up, which means that he would have to wait until October to have his certificate issued. So that is why I'm asking that it be put on the emergency agenda.
That was my question.
Okay, so that question's been answered. Board members, would you like to hear from our staff or from Mr. Hanlon? I'd like okay. I've been advised to get a motion, so is there a motion on this item? Is there?
Without more information.
Okay, I don't have to have a motion on the floor. Let's go ahead and get some information.
Just to give you a brief overview, Mr. Hanlon was pled guilty to second-degree battery, 2 counts of second-degree battery in 2003. He's completed the terms of his sentence. He has had no convictions since. It's been 9 years, and he has just recently completed his education program. Where was that? At Holy Cross College.
I'm sorry, where?
Holy Cross.
Can you put the mic near you, Mr. Hanlon? And Mr. Bennett, do you have a question?
I'm seeing on the report more than one conviction, or more than one charge at least. I'm seeing something in 2003, which you spoke of, but also a charge in 2008 and 2002.
Those were arrests, but there were no convictions. Do you want to speak to those?
Yeah, that's fine, I will. What charge was it, sir?
Can you speak to all of them?
2008, it was disturbing the peace, drunk in public.
In 2000 and when?
2008.
2008. That was in Slidell. It was 2008. If you want me to talk about the incidents, I can. I don't know how you would like me to, or...
It's Mr. Bennett's question.
Well, I'd like to hear, and also I'd like to hear about 2002. Is that a different charge of second-degree battery, intentional serious bodily injury besides the 2003? Or is that part of the?
That is
That-
2000.
Part of the same?
Yes, sir,
program?
that was part of the
All right.
2002 of October. The incident in 2008, the reason why I didn't get convicted, I went and talked to the judge, and they found me, I guess the right way to say is not guilty, and they kind of threw the charges away at the time. What the police officers thought of that night, it wasn't the right way, I guess.
So you were not convicted of this charge?
No, sir, I was not.
What, if I may ask, Madam Chair, the second-degree battery, and I hate to ask these questions in this form, I don't know how else to do it.
Yes, sir.
Can you provide some detail?
A brief description?
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. In 2002, I attended Southeastern University. I was playing football there as well. Incident occurred one night, on Thursday night, where my girlfriend was attacked, or should I say, an incident occurred, and I felt in self-defense where I stood up for myself, and it was more of a riot fight almost. If you look at the reports, from about 30 guys against 5, and I was in defense mode, and I took care of myself at the time. And that's the verdict that I came out with, defending myself and for my friends at the time, and it was just a fight.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Beebe to grant certification. Is that your intent? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Lee.
I'll have another question if I may.
Okay, so I'm going to hold on we now have a motion on the floor. Mr. Romer.
In all other ways, does the applicant meet the terms of certification?
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Any other questions? Ms. Bradford.
In your opinion, what have you done to change your modus operandi? What have you done to rehabilitate anger management?
Well, since the incident in 2002, you know, after the storm, I went and I've graduated from college on a business degree, and then after that, I pursued my career into teaching because that's where I felt that I would like to be in. And other than that, I basically have never been in trouble ever since then, and I've been on the right path. You know, for me, Christ is in my life, and I've always gone to church, and I think that's one way that, you know, talking to God, and that's basically how I've pursued my life from here on out since 2002. And you know, I wish things would never happen. That's probably the worst things that's been on my record since, and it's, you know, kind of always on your background. And you know, at the time I was 18 years old, and you know, now I'm 29, and I just stuck up for myself at the time, and you know, and my friends. And you think back, now I got the right way where I can help out kids make the right decisions as well. And I think that's the path that I'm going to, you know, helping others.
One follow-up. Do you see yourself as a role model for the young men and women that you
Yes, ma'am, I do.
influence? Thank you.
Do you have a question, Mr. Gann? You currently have a position. You've been teaching for several years. Is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
correct?
I'm in the parochial school at Pope John Paul II High School, and now as well just got a job offered to me in the St. Bernard Parish.
And what do you teach?
Social studies and physical education.
Okay, board members, are any further questions? There's a proper motion and second on the floor to grant certification. Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion's granted. Thank you for
ma'am.
being here today.
Thank you.
If there are no more items on the agenda, that concludes the meeting.
Okay, the board meeting is now adjourned. Thanks, Catherine.